begins up here in the lateral ventricle, goes through a couple of other sections, and ends up in this canal of the spinal cord. So all of that fluid that's bathing the brain is also bathing the spinal cord. All right, so that brings us now to the model of the spinal cord. So if someone can get me that model right there, right, the gray one. All right. So this is one of my favorite models because it shows a simple reflex. The thing to take away from this model is that reflexes do not go to the brain. Reflexes are primitive responses that don't take any thought. They're just innate. So here's the spinal cord. Here's skin. Here's muscle. Okay. So in the skin, you can see the nice stratified squamous epithelium. There are receptors, these little green things. And the receptors are picking up signals like pressure or touch or vibration, hot, cold, things like that. And it sends that information through these nerves here, through these neurons. And the yellow is sensory, because sensory is the input. Or when you feel something, or you smell something, or you taste something, it's all sensation, sensory. Right? So sensory information goes through a sensory neuron, through this big thing called the spinal nerve, and then it gets to a point where the sensory information goes in the back, and the motor information is in the front. Okay? The back of the spinal cord is always going to be sensory, and the front of the cord is always going to be motor. Now, motor doesn't mean moving all the time. You know, it means moving, but it also means things like telling a gland to secrete, or telling a smooth muscle in your intestine to contract so that it can move the stuff along, the feces along. So if it's not sensory, which is one of your five senses, then it's probably motor. Okay? But the take home here is that the input is here, right? The input is here, and the output is there. But look, they share a tube. The yellow and the orange share the spinal nerve. Right? So when you look at a nerve, the nerve could have sensory fibers and motor fibers in it. It's not just sensory or just motor. Okay? So down here, it's all sensory, this neuron. Here it's sensory and motor. Here it's just sensory or motor, one or the other. Here is all sensory, here is motor, and then back out to the muscle, and the muscle moves. Okay? So you step on a nail, you say a couple of bad words, right? The information goes up through your spinal nerve, through the back. This is called the dorsal root. Through the dorsal root into the gray matter of the spinal cord. If you notice, it's white and gray. Two distinct colors. Just like in the brain, if you look at it, there's white and gray as well. Lighter and darker. The white represents myelinated axons. Axons that have the lipid myelin surrounding it to insulate it to make the impulse go faster. Okay. So the sensory information comes through this dorsal root, goes into the back part of this H, right? It looks like an H, right? This is called the dorsal horn. And in a reflex, the sensory neuron makes a synapse with a small neuron inside the gray matter. This is called an interneuron. Inter meaning between. So this is the neuron between the sensory and the motor. You only find interneurons in the spinal cord and in the brain. Okay? The interneuron synapses with the motor neuron. The motor neuron comes out the ventral horn into the ventral root, and then to the effector muscle, or the effector organ, whatever that thing is going to be, that's going to move or contract or what have you. Okay. In my PowerPoint for the nervous system, and I'll put it in Blackboard for you, has this picture, and I labeled it with all the different parts to it. So you'll have that in the slides. Okay. All right, put that back there. And just to be complete, if we look, this one really doesn't show it very well, but you can kind of see where part of it's lighter and part of it's darker. Okay. If we cut it this way, you would see it a lot better. But I'm sure that none of them are cut that way. Your book has better pictures of it than what we can see on here because of white and dark. All right, so we did the reflex area. Now we need to look at some major nerves in the cat. So, in the body, nerves are big, thick strings. So this is a good example of a nerve right here. Okay? They're varying sizes. They could be thin, they could be thick, or they could be really thick. This is the sciatic nerve. Okay? And the sciatic nerve starts back here in the spinal cord, comes down, and it branches off into two smaller nerves. One nerve that goes to the front of your leg, and the other stays in the back of the leg. Okay. So there are some interesting nerves in the chest. So this is the heart. This is in pt2. You'll go through this, but here's the heart and its coverings, and here's the little nerve next to it, right here. See that little guy? This nerve is going to this structure right here. What do you think the structure is called? It's a thing that separates your thorax from your abdomen. What is it? The diaphragm. The diaphragm is a muscle, right? So it needs to have a neuron making it contract. That's what this nerve is. This nerve here is called the phrenic nerve. P-H-R-E-N-I-C. Phrenic. Just how it happens to be spelled the same way as diaphragm, because diaphragm is P-H-R-G-A-G-M, right? So the phrenic nerve innervates the diaphragm. Remember nerve 10 from the skull, from the cranial nerves, we said was the vagus nerve. It's the only one that goes down into the abdomen. Well, here you can see it in the abdomen, in the thorax rather, right here. That's the vagus nerve. You did look at the muscles. I remember, right? With the day that I wasn't here, you did the muscles. Right? I don't see it on here the spinal accessory nerve usually runs right here, but I don't. It's thicker than that. But the nerve here will be the spinal accessory nerve.
Is it the only one near the spine?
It's the only one that's on the scapula like that. Okay. All right. So here, see this nerve here, similar to the leg. You remember the thigh had the sciatic nerve that split. This nerve, the upper extremity has a big nerve that splits also into the radial and the ulnar nerves, which go on either side of the hand, of the extremity, right? The radial side is the thumb side, the ulnar side is the pinky side. But here's where we're gonna be spending most of our time with nerves, right here. See all these nerves here? These nerves all come from the spinal cord. And they come from the levels of the spinal cord, C8, T1, T2, T3, T4. Okay, 5 nerve roots. And then those nerve roots all kind of come through the body, the wall of the body, and go into the armpit. So this is what we call the axilla, the armpit. Okay, so this is axillary. This whole structure is called the brachial plexus because it's going to take all these nerves and bring it to the brachium. Okay. So if you look at this specimen here, it kind of looks like a letter M. I have 2 of these here to spread this out.
Like a little what?
The letter M. Up, down, up, down. Get the other one and put it over here. All right, so up, down, up, down. You may have to use your imagination, but it looks like a letter M. And in the handout, I think the last page is a drawing of that letter M. Yep. So the nerves that make up this letter M come from this brachial plexus. This one here, the one that's further towards me, right? This is the ulnar nerve. This middle one is the median nerve. Median is the middle, right? So you kind of remember that. And the one thin one on the top here, that's called the musculocutaneous nerve. So just for brain exercise, what do you think the musculocutaneous nerve does? There's 2 functions to it. Musculo and cutaneous. So it's going to do something to a muscle. That's the muscular part. And what's the cutaneous part mean? Skin. So it's going to be sensory to the skin of the extremity in some places, and motor to the muscles that move the brachium, move the arm. Musculocutaneous nerve. So those are those 3 nerves on top. Now if I bring this over and move it out of the way, I see a huge nerve on the bottom. That nerve is called the radial nerve. Okay. That radial nerve is the same nerve that I showed you a few minutes ago that's split into these 2. I have a hard time grabbing onto it. See where it splits? That's the radial nerve that's going to split. Okay. And then the ulnar nerve is this one here that goes this way, and the radial nerve is this part that goes to the thumb side of the paw. Okay. Now, muscles are on this M too, so you have to remember the muscles. So this would be a good time to go through the muscles, if the major muscles, if you don't remember them, to get them in your memory. Muscle here, big muscle here. You have this muscle right here. So you got the biceps, you got femoral, you get biceps brachii, which means biceps of the arm. You have the brachialis muscle. You have the coracobrachialis muscle, which is up here. And you also have the brachioradialis muscle, which is this one here. Goes from the brachium to the radius. Brachioradialis. Triceps. Here's the if we put the triceps back where they belong, right? There's three parts of the triceps. This part here is the lateral head of the triceps, which has now been opened up. This is the long head of the triceps. And then between them is a really thin muscle right here called the medial head. Okay? That's your tri right there, right? Know that these muscles here act to do this to the paw. So what direction is that? If you're putting it like this, he's going from, let's say, a 90-degree angle to that. That's an extension, right? So all of these here are extenders of the paw. All of these on this side are flexors of the paw, right? Because if you actually pulled some of these muscles, watch this. Right, if I straighten it out and I pull it, see how I flex. And if you try that yourself, you actually feel the muscle on your finger, how you're getting tighter. Right? And then on this side, these muscles here would bring it the other way. Right? All right, so some other muscles here. The one that looks like a fan is called the serratus ventralis. The serratus means looks like fingers, serrations. And there's a nerve on top of that as well, right here. See this nerve right here? This is called the long thoracic nerve.
The one that you touched?
This one here. Yeah. Here's the scapula. So this muscle here is above the spine of the scapula, which is here. So this is the supraspinatus, and beneath it is the infraspinatus. Here's the spine, so you could feel the spine, but inferior to the spine, infraspinatus. The muscle over here, this one, is a muscle called teres major. These cut muscles, right? If we put this back to where it was, here is the clavodeltoid and the acromiodeltoid and the spinodeltoid. The spinodeltoid is going to be cut. Okay, so if you try to place this back where it is, this is the spinodeltoid here. It's cut because underneath that is teres minor. And that's how you know you're finding teres minor, because it's underneath spinal deltoid. Okay. So that's the front. Let's put this back where it was. So this here is your abdominal muscles, right? So, and this is your thoracic muscles. This muscle here starts here, comes this way, and it actually was cut right here. So this and this go together. So we when we cut, we say we resect it. R-E-S-E-C-T, resect, it means to cut. And to reflect means to open it up. So this is the latissimus dorsi. We already talked about those. In here, we have the rhomboids. The rhomboids move the shoulder, move the scapula. Okay. Rhomboid major, rhomboid minor is the big one. In the cat, minor is bigger than major, with a few exceptions. Terry's major is the exception, one of the exceptions. So the bigger one here is rhomboid minor, and the major one is actually smaller, right there. And remember over here we had the one with the serrations, the serratus ventralis? It begins back here behind the scapula. This is the beginning of it right here. So if you put your finger in, you could actually see where it comes out. Right, I'm touching the serratus ventralis now. On the lower extremity, there are some muscles. Here's let's try to get it back the way it was. This is the biceps femoris. And when you open that up, that's when you see another muscle here. This is called the caudofemoralis. This is a muscle that's unique to the cat. We don't have one of these. But it's right next to the spine. That's sciatic nerve. So be careful. They kind of look alike on first glance. So the tendon and the nerve, you have to know which one is which in order to be able to fix them. Right? The thigh muscles, there are 4 of them that are known as the quadriceps. Right? You're working on your quads. So I like to think of them as a hot dog and a bun. Okay, the hot dog is the middle one here, and the middle one is called the rectus femoris. It's the straight muscle of the femur. Medial to that is the vastus medialis, and lateral to that is the vastus lateralis. So the 2 vastus muscles here are the bun, and the rectus femoris is the hot dog. Okay. Now there is also a vastus intermedius, which you can't see because it's being covered by the rectus femoris. So if we were to cut that and reflect it, you'd be able to see underneath it. But take my word for it, it's there. So those are the 4 muscles that make up the quads. Okay, the three vastus muscles and the rectus femoris. On top of that, normally, sits this muscle, and that's called sartorius. Reflex sartorius. Now you can see some big muscles on the thigh. This is the medial part of the thigh. So these are all adductor muscles. They pull the thigh towards the center. Right? You kind of see if you were to pull that, you would do that, right? But these are nice and thick. These are huge. These are like chicken nugget kind of muscles. But they would be called cat nugget muscles if that was a cat. But you can see how thick they are compared to some of these really thin ones, right? So these are the adductors. The posterior thigh muscles are better known as your hamstrings. Okay? And there are 3 of them. There's, let's see if we can, this one here, and this one next to it. 1, 2, 3. The hamstrings. And the one that's lateral most is the Well, semimembranosus, semitendinosus. Gracilis is medial. I'm having a brain fart. Wouldn't be here. The binder. We have the binder for a second. Because there's pictures. For some reason, I can't remember the name of that muscle. So when in doubt, look it up. Lower extremity. Here we go. All right. So biceps femoris and semitendinosus and semimembranosus make up the hamstrings. Biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. So remember, here's the biceps. This is semitendinosus, and this is semimembranosus, the big one. Tendinosus is the smaller one.
So what's is that sciatic?
This is the sciatic nerve, yeah.
Okay.
This branch going to the front is called the tibial nerve, and the one that stays in the back is called the fibular nerve or the perineal nerve. Now,
What is this thing?
semitendinosus. That's this one right here.
Okay, and the other one?
That's the one behind it right here.
The big one. Oh, okay.
Your calf muscle. It's called the gastrocnemius, and it inserts by a big tendon into the heel. This would be called the calcaneal tendon because it goes to the calcaneus. You also may have heard of it as the Achilles tendon. Remember in the story of Achilles that they cut the tendon and he couldn't walk? Well, this tendon here is the major tendon that does this motion. What motion is that? Plantar flexion. Right, so if you cut your Achilles tendon, or if your Achilles tendon is injured, then you can't plantar flex, which means you can't go on your toes, which means you can't walk, because half of your gait, is on your toes and on your heel. And I think that's it. Where's the major nerves? Yep. So that was that's kind of the gist of the stuff you have to get through today. Remember, next week is the exam. So it'll have the muscles, it'll have the brain, it'll have the nerves, it'll have the spinal, the models. You could have a microscope slide over there. There's muscle over there, or neuron over there to refresh your memory what neuron looks like.
We will have these two.
Oh yeah.
The cat.
Oh yeah.
The sheep brain.
Yeah. I just said the cat, the sheep brain,
And the human.
the model
Mm-hmm.
of the spinal cord. Probably this one as well. Anything that you've done since the last test is
So
fair game.
physiology of the muscles. Okay.
There could be the results of one of those Physio EX experiments you did, and you'd have to interpret the results.
Do we have the origin and action and all that? stuff,
Origin,
or the
insertion,
muscle?
and action. Yep. They would get any of that.
Human muscle.
Yep. Yeah. It's almost over. We've got a week left.
So after that exam, that's our last class.
Next week is the last class. For lab. Yeah.
Do you remember the worksheet you gave us with all the muscles? Those are the only muscles we have to worry about?
The ones you drew?
Yeah.
Those are the ones that you had to worry about for the clay mod. Remember the clay? So if there's clay on a skeleton, it'll be one of those muscles.
I don't understand what you mean today.
We didn't do the play.
You didn't do it, but sometimes what happened is that the person's making a